Welcome to the commentary for my video, Building a Dog Hydrotherapy Tank. People have asked, so here it is. To begin any construction in fiberglass, some type of mould has to be built. This could be a proper fiberglass mould that you can produce hundreds of items from, or a single-use disposable mould like I used here. I only needed one tank, so it was less expensive and quicker for the client to make the single-use disposable mould. I often use 16mm MDF melamine for building a mould. It is strong enough to hold its shape, particularly over long spans. I use bog to hold it all together, not screws or nails. If you ever build using screws and nails, there is a good chance you will see why bog is the better choice. By bog, I mean my own mixture of glue. The construction is very simple. The tank is a box. Generally, you have to give the sides a taper, so the opening of the box is wider than the base. This will allow the mould to slip out of the finished fiberglass tank. But in this case, it doesn't make any difference. I will be disassembling the mould to get it out of the finished fiberglass tank. Fiberglass will not go over sharp corners, so as you assemble the tank, you must make sure to route around on the corners. It is best to do this progressively as you build the tank, as once the tank is completely assembled, you won't be able to get access to some parts to route. You must determine which edges will be seen and which won't. You must route round onto the seen edges. Generally 12mm is good enough, but you can go bigger if you want, maybe 15mm. But not too big, as that will cause problems of a new type that you don't want. You can see as we go through the video that the corners are a different colour. That's because they have been routed. You can see I have glued blocks onto the inside of the wall, so the base can sit on them and be glued into place. On the far left, you can see 3 pieces of MDF glued to the end of the side. These tabs are used to add the additional wall sections onto. The MDF isn't long enough, so I had to add another piece. The additional piece will be glued onto the first side piece. As the base of the tank has a wide span, it was necessary to support it internally. If not, it would flex and bend and probably fall to the ground. I used some off-cut MDF to make some narrow frames that were screwed to the blocks that were glued to the inside of the tank wall. It doesn't matter if you screw these to the blocks. I built the 2 long sides and one end at first, so I was able to get inside the mould to work. With one end still not assembled into place, I glued the first section of base in place on the mould. Now I built the other end the same way as the first end. The additional side pieces were glued onto the tabs we saw earlier. This makes the tank the full length. You can see the blocks are glued in place on the walls to hold the second section of base. Next, the end is glued onto the sides. Unfortunately, when joining pieces of MFD or plywood like this, it can be hard to get the finished surface completely flat. In this case, I used string lines to get it as good as I could. But it is only a dog wash tank, so absolute perfection wasn't required. The base frames are screwed into place for the last piece of base. The fun part is now dropping the base onto the frames. You may need to do this a few times to adjust things, so it fits into place accurately. Once you know the base piece is correct, put some bog onto the frames and drop it into place. You may not need to put anything heavy on the base to hold it in place, as the weight of the MFD is probably enough. You will have to bog and fill all joins and gaps. These are the corners, and where the side pieces are joined together. Fill any gaps with bog and sand them smooth. Try not to go crazy and damage the MDF finish too much. Fill the grain of the MDF and finish sanding with a fine sandpaper like 320 or 400 grit. Yes, you are sanding only MDF and bog, but finishing with a fine paper makes for better release and rework later. Now all the assembly and messy parts are done on the body of the tank. It is time to slide the flanges under the tank opening. Cut lengths of MDF, about 50mm or more, and slide them under the tank. They must stick out from the side of the tank the width you require. I think I made these flanges about 50mm. Generally, I wouldn't go any less than 30mm. Once the flanges are in place, put a bog fillet into the inside corner, where the flange meets the wall to make an internal round. Bog and sand all joins in the flanges. Make it all neat, clean and smooth. Sand the fillets and joins the same as the corners to make it smooth. Make sure there are no holes in the fillet or the gel coat or the tank will stick into them and cause release problems. This is the finished mould. Now make sure the mould is wiped clean and there are no bits of bog stuck anywhere. Make sure it is as perfect as you want. While you are cleaning, Make sure to clean the floor around as well as anywhere that dust or rubbish could get onto the mould. Once you are happy with the finished mould, it is time to wax. Get a tin of mould, release wax, and give a good wax coverage to the entire mould. Make sure you particularly work the wax into any exposed grain of the MDF. Apply the wax to small sections at a time, maybe 400mm by 1 metre, and then wipe it off. This all depends on how many people are helping you wax the weather and the temperature as you are applying the wax. Don't cover a huge section of wax at one time because once the wax has dried, it is very hard work to polish it off. Progressively work your way around the mould, making sure you cover it all without missing anywhere. Give the mould 2 good waxes. If you are worried the tank will stick to the mould, you can do more. Put a few more just on the corners. As many coats as you like, but 6 should be ample. If you are really worried, you could use PVA, but there aren't too many good PVAs out there. PVA can cause triping and fisheyes or cause your tank finish to look average. If you are worried, use PVA just on the exposed wood of the rooted corners. That's where it is most likely to stick. Now the mould is ready to gel coat. Prepare your room so you can move easily around the mould and get your gun ready. I do not recommend using a normal spray gun with a big nozzle. Yes, I have used one in the past out of desperation, but it was only for a small job. Doing a big tank like this will be a hair-depleting experience. You are best to use a polycon gun or a proper depositor. I did this with a polycon gun. I generally gel coat as the last thing I do for the day. It is impossible to work in a room or workshop while the gel coat is drying unless you have a very big place. I would gel coat the mould, clean the gun and everything, when finished spraying, and then go home for the day. This has the added advantage of giving the gel coat plenty of time to become rock hard. So once your gun is ready, work out how many pots of gel coat you will use and have them ready. Have everything ready so, while you are spraying, once you empty the first pot, you can quickly mix and use the next pot, working your way through them all until the mould is completely covered. Sorry, but this isn't a gel coat course. Gel coating is a large story of its own, but I'm thinking of doing a gel coat course in the future. So when the gel coat is cured, in 3 or 4 hours or maybe next day when you return, it is time to laminate. Cut your glass to the correct sizes so there is minimal waste, and it is easy to apply, and then start laminating your first layer. I often do a single layer first and let it cure. With a tank this size, the first pieces of glass you lay will probably be dry by the time you lay the last one. If you aren't in a hurry, wait until the next day and do the next 2 layers. I think for this tank, as it is so big, I laid about 8 or 10 layers of CSM and woven rovings combined. As this was a long tank, I put a few ribs on the outside to give a little extra stiffening. The tank was going into a full wooden support frame, so it really didn't need it, but I wanted to be sure. To make the ribs, I ripped a few 30mm lengths of polyurethane foam, rounded the corners and glassed them on. Just 2 or 3 layers of CSM. Once all the glass was laminated, I gave it a day to dry and then trimmed the flange around the opening. Buy a cheap diamond cutting wheel and put it into an angle grinder. That will cut the flanges very easily and cleanly. Depending on the size of your workshop or room and the size of your mould, you can either tip the tank over and remove the mould where it is, or drag it outside and do it there. In this case, it was easier to put the tank on a slide and pull it out of the workshop with my car. I raised one end of the tank and mould and pulled the MDF apart while underneath. Be careful as the base pieces of MDF are heavy, and I would say they would hurt if they fell on top of you. Once you have the MDF out, stack them somewhere safe to use on another job and turn the tank over. If you have done everything correctly, the tank should be the exact reverse of the MDF mould. You will probably find that the inside corners of the tank will need to be wet and dried to a good finish, and then buffed to a gloss. The exposed timber corners generally don't leave a good finish, unless you have spent a large amount of time and effort to make the mould corners look perfect. Unfortunately, rough corners is one of the drawbacks of using a one-off disposable mould. Check all the surfaces of the tank, but they should be okay. You may want to give it all a good cut and polish to bring up the shine. And that is it. Hope this helps and happy building.